Well, good evening, IFL Nation, and welcome back to the lab. This is your weekly rundown and best source of all things Indoor Football League, where we recap the week that was, forecast the week that is to come, and discuss all of the other goings on of this amazing league. Ladies and gentlemen, it is once again Wager Wednesday in the Indoor Football League. Thank you so much for tuning in, taking some time out of your night to talk about the best indoor football league in the world. For those of you who are new to this channel specifically, or to the Indoor Football League, or the arena game in general, I want to warmly welcome you aboard. My name is Alex Schuberth. I am a huge fan of the indoor game, and that passion is something that I've channeled into my current role as lead IFL contributor for Sports Coast to Coast, which is a Pacific Northwest-based sports forum site which specializes specifically in the coverage of the Indoor Football League and its 14-member teams specifically. We have breaking news updates, up-to-date team rosters, game previews, game recaps, wide variety of other analysis out there. It is a fantastic source for all things past and present relating to the Indoor Football League. So I've linked that below in the description. There you will also find the written version of my Wager Wednesday post, which I put out there yesterday in the evening. So give that a look if you'd like as well. And I've linked that directly as well in the description below. So definitely check both out. There is a lot of great league-related stuff there. So without further ado, let's get into it. We've got a bunch of ground to cover today. Very excited to get into it with each and every one of you tonight. So here we go. Week 5. We're already, by week count, 20% of the way through the regular season. Hard to believe. So week 4 is what we had last weekend, and there was basically enough suspense and drama there to feed generations. We had 4 games on the docket, each one telling an amazing story. We will get into the recaps of each one of those games in more detail in just a few minutes. We're going to take that 4-game sample, add it to our population of 2026 results so far. Now that we're getting more data in there, we can talk significant trends that have kind of established themselves in the early going. So we'll look at our bet results specifically, along with team and league trends across the 3 different bet types. Once we do all that reflection, we'll dive in to our first of 3 consecutive full week slates. That's right. It's 7 games, all 14 teams in action for the next 3 weeks. We really kick this season into hyperdrive starting on Saturday. We'll go through each and every game, make our picks for the 7 offerings, and then we will put together a 3-leg parlay of the week, which I am hoping, guys, I'm hoping that this one is the winner. What exactly am I looking at? In case you maybe want to fade, stay tuned till the very end to find out. All right, so week 4, we had a couple games Saturday and a couple games on Sunday. We led things off with a Western Conference clash. This was the Tucson Sugar Skulls and the New Mexico Chupacabras in a game that was projected fairly even, according to the odds makers, with both teams given an equal chance to win this game. And right from the jump on this one, Tucson made some big plays within the first 20 minutes of the game, scoring on their opening possession of the game, and then seeing their defense get a fumble recovery for a touchdown. The special teams whips around and blocks a field goal attempt, recovers in the end zone for a touchdown. So Tucson already had a 21-0 lead before New Mexico could really get themselves going. And to the Chupacabras' credit, they stuck in there. They eventually gave Draylon Ellis enough problems offensively, forced a turnover, a couple of other empty possessions with field goal attempts and whatnot. And through a gritty effort, the Chupacabras trimmed the deficit from 21 to 5. And late in the fourth quarter, they had an opportunity to take the lead, but it was an ill-timed decision from the arm of Jerome Johnson that resulted in an interception for the Sugar Skulls. Brian Murray, the recipient of that pick, returns it into Chupacabra territory, and then with like a minute to go, they got the separation they needed with the touchdown run by Brandon Mackey. The Chupacabras did score late, but couldn't quite steal that last possession away to really solidify that comeback bid. So that game ending, very suspenseful outing. Tucson on the road, winning 45-40, and our Chupacabra money line bet came up just short to open up this week. Our Eastern Conference Saturday matchup featured the Green Bay Blizzard and the Iowa Barnstormers, a game where Green Bay was pretty heavily favored, and to their credit, they pretty much played right out the gate as if they were the stronger team, forcing a couple straight Iowa stops on offense and riding Liam Thompson and his hot streak to 3 consecutive touchdown drives to start things off. Into the second quarter, Green Bay already had a 23-0 advantage, and they maintained that advantage right around that 15 to 19 point pocket throughout the game. And heading into the fourth quarter, they were up 30-19. What ended up transpiring from there, from a betting standpoint at least, absolute nonsense. Green Bay scoring, Iowa scoring, Green Bay scoring on a short field. In the end, we wound up with a 40-point fourth quarter that saw the over 88.5 cash on a 2-point conversion by Harry Rubidoux, the first successful 2-point conversion out of 5 tries for the Iowa Barnstormers in that game. They managed to cut the lead to 11. They did get the backdoor cover there. But from a more practical in-game standpoint, the Blizzard were just too much for the young Iowa team to handle. They take that game 50-39. And simply by divine intervention, our over 88.5 bet cashes. That is our first over-under win on a single game pick this season. So carrying a little bit of that, let's say it, luck-filled momentum, we went into Sunday's doubleheader, leading things off with the Quad City Steamwheelers taking on the Orlando Pirates, who were the underdogs, albeit slightly, at their home arena in their Kia Center debut. And dare I say, this game, after a little bit of a sluggish start from both teams, turned out to be bona fide game of the year material. Quad City, they started strong. They had an early 14-point lead, but Orlando came back a little bit in the late stages of that first half. They ended up taking a 1-point lead heading into the locker room, stretched that lead out to 8 in the second half. Quad City getting a big takeaway late in the third quarter to kind of give themselves the half-step lead. And basically the fourth quarter was all about, how that lead exchanged hands. You look 1 minute, Quad City's up by 4. You look the next minute, Orlando's up by 3. Deciding play of the game was right around the 1 minute warning. Orlando down by 4, had to have a touchdown, and Paxton DeLaurent delivered an impressively strong pass. Nyquan Murray catches it in the back right corner of the end zone. That gave the Pirates the lead, and it would take a couple of defensive stops from that Orlando defense to keep Quad City at bay and emerge with the victory, but that is precisely what Rob Keefe's defense went out and accomplished. A doozy of a game. Orlando stays undefeated. They advanced to 2-0 thanks to the 49-46 win over one of their fiercest rivals in the Quad City Steamwheelers, who are now 1-2 and quickly looking for answers amidst an absolute gauntlet of a schedule. We wrap things up with the nightcap in Week 4. The Arizona Rattlers heading the road, taking on the Fishers Freight. for the first ever matchup between these two franchises. And my oh my, I feel like some people had Fishers winning this game. I don't think a lot of people had just the way that it happened. Purely from an offensive standpoint, Fishers was positively perfect. They rode that running game and pretty much pushed Arizona's defensive line on their rear ends essentially all game long. And by the time they got Arizona kind of behind that 8-ball a little bit, down by 14 points, not even IFL MVP of 2025 Max Myler could do a whole heck of a lot about it. It was just, words can't describe that exhibition that Fishers put on. It was insane, to say the least. But a signature win for the franchise, to be sure. Amidst a perfect offensive outing and a pretty impressive defensive performance, all things considered, Fishers gets the best of the Arizona Rattlers by a final score of 62-43. The 7:30 p.m. Sunday game getting over 100 points for the second week in a row, leaving our third bet of the week as a positively no-doubter. So that is the path that we took to our first true winning week of the season. 3 wins and 1 loss. That evens up our yearly record with 7 wins and 7 losses. And as you can see on the bottom left, we've balanced out our money line selections and spreads and over-unders pretty well so far. Again, we're look to kind of keep that going, but in sort of an organic fashion, if that makes sense. But yeah, 7-7 on the season. We're dead even. Still operating at a slight loss on the financial aspect, but we're firmly on that upswing. And a lot of our losses, the majority of our losses actually, have been by 1 possession. So aside from a couple hiccups here and there with how we thought games were going to shake out, we've pretty much been right in the conversation every single time, which, especially early on in the season, is a very, very encouraging sign. Our individual parlay for week 4 did not turn out so great. Not going to lie, I did think that it was a sign from God that Iowa plus 12.5 actually made it as that opening leg. But unfortunately for us, another over-under pick on the parlay kind of cooked us. We had kind of looked at Quad City Orlando as maybe more of a defensive-oriented game, and it was shaping out to be that way a little bit in the first 15 minutes, but it ended up being a back-and-forth shootout type of affair. Both teams getting a ton of possessions, more so than your typical IFL game gets. And the Steam Wheelers and Pirates combined for 95 points to put that into the ground. And even had we gotten that pick correct, leave it to Arizona money line the instant that I picked them to come crashing down in spectacular fashion. So very weird here that the over-under picks on our parlay legs are 0-5 so far. Kind of a weird spell to be taking, but you know what? We're going to keep constructing these, see if we can get them to hit. Again, we're looking for 4 successful attempts on these parlays this season. And I will say, even though this one sort of crumbled, I did come up with a terrific triumvirate parlay with last week's special guests, Trey from Off the Wall and Cody from In the Alley. We both put together 1 leg apiece, and it turned out to be a plus 595 winner. So for those of you who are a bit skeptical amidst our individual 17 parlay losing streak, listen, the proof's in the pudding right here. 3 correct picks in 1 span is very much possible. So definitely encouraging there. And who knows? Maybe the 3 of us go back-to-back this week. Who knows? So here's a graphical representation of where we are in terms of net gain or loss at this point in the season. Had that uncharacteristic week 2, but in the couple weeks since then, we've bounced back really nicely. And as my sister likes to call this, a 4-week exercise in futility. But we'll see if we can keep going up here and wind up in the green by this week's end. That is the goal. All right, now's the time where we can discuss team and league trends throughout the first 4 weeks of the season. And I will say, at least for last week, if you are a fan of points, and if you are a fan of underdogs, last week was heaven for you. If you like underdogs plus overs in any capacity, that combination was absolute perfect bliss last week. Both bet types going a perfect 4-0, bringing the underdogs ATS record to a whopping 10-4 this season, which I find a little bit unusual, especially with some of these spreads being a little bit more muted than we had seen in, say, 2023 or 2024. Yeah, really, it's just been underdogs feasting. It's been home teams emerging victorious more often than not. And you know what? Even those underdogs outright through these first 14 games, cashing half the time. That would be terrific if you had spent each of the past 4 weeks betting nothing except the underdogs. You'd have a pretty solid ROI flirting around that 14-15% clip so far on the season. So as we move forward into the season, and as we expect to see these regress to the mean a little bit, we'll have to make those decisions on each individual game, tail or fade. That's really the name of the game at this point in our tenure here. As far as perfect streaks on the spread, only 2 teams remain undefeated on the spread, and wouldn't you know it, both teams have only played 1 game so far. That would be the Jacksonville Sharks and the Tulsa Oilers. We have 2 teams that have yet to cover against the spread, only San Diego of which has played multiple games so far. San Antonio with that home loss against the Oilers back in week 3 as that lone outcome. We have 3 teams that are perfect to the over so far in Orlando, Tucson, and New Mexico. And the only 3 teams that have yet to record an under, the Gunslingers, the Sharks, and the Oilers. Again, each of them has only played 1 game to this point. Wouldn't shock me one bit if we saw 1, 2, or even all 3 of them wind up filling that out. So here's a look at our trends team by team. A lot of the perfect streaks we've already hit upon. New Mexico's 2-0 over streak, pretty notable in that both of their games have only gone over by that half-point hook. It was 78.5 in the 79-point outcome against Orlando, and last week it was 84.5 when they and the Sugar Skulls combined for 85 exactly. So that goes to show you how razor thin you can make some of these margins in terms of evaluating strictly from an over and under standpoint. We'll also see if the Sugar Skulls stay perfect on the over-under. Their games have been fairly high scoring this season, actually. They had that 107-point game against Vegas, and then last week they had that 85-point game against the Chupacabras. That made the over by the hook, so we're going to see some of these streaks on the line, and who knows? Some of these might get to 3-0. Some of them might get to 0-3. We'll just have to see where things stand once we actually play out these games this week. Our personal record with each team, we're looking to log our first win for 4 teams, 2 of which actually will wind up playing against each other this week. Sneak preview, New Mexico, Northern Arizona will be the first game that we discuss tonight. We'll also look to get our first win on a San Diego Strikeforce prediction, and we'll get an opportunity at redemption on the Jacksonville Sharks after we faded them incorrectly in their win against Northern Arizona a couple weeks ago. All right, weekly disclaimer time. The lines and odds that we're going to be using today going to come from DraftKings Sportsbook, as they always do. This series is purely a construct of fun and curiosity. It is not meant to be any sort of betting advice or as a means to basically make money. Um, it's not meant to be kind of construed in that way. After all, there's no such thing as a guarantee or a lock in the sports wagering world. Um, if you would like to play along and tail or fade my selections, you're more than welcome to do so, but please play responsibly. Practice safe gaming habits. That includes setting a budget in terms of both time and money. Risk only what you can afford to lose. And if you feel like you or a loved one is having an issue with potentially teetering on problem gaming, there's a lot of resources online and issued out by individual states that give assistance in that area. Good examples include responsibleplay.org. HaveagamePlan.org is another one that I've got listed there. And like I said, state resources are there as well if that need arises. Main point being, help is out there should the need arise. With that said, look at our beautiful big board right there. 7 games, 14 teams. Ladies and gentlemen, this is week 5 of the Indoor Football League season. Let's get at it. Our opening game, as stated earlier, will feature the Northern Arizona Wranglers on the road against the New Mexico Chupacabras, playing their third and final game of their home stretch. Chupacabras are laying 2.5 points as home favorites. The over-under is 83.5. On the money line, Northern Arizona is plus 120 and New Mexico is minus 142. For both teams, at stake, that long-awaited first win of the 2026 season. The Wranglers coming into this game off a bye week. A couple weeks ago, they had lost a pretty disheartening game to the Jacksonville Sharks, one that they lost 47-24. That Shark defense just made Northern Arizona look really confused and disjointed. I know the Wranglers didn't have Kobe Smith for that game. He got injured in the opener. No really specified timetable for return from what I could tell. But yeah, this is a good opportunity for Northern Arizona to kind of get back on that saddle and see if they can strut a level of efficiency that they showed in their opener at San Diego. With Ramon Atkins-Frazier at quarterback, Nolan Sussel at running back. The addition of Kayron Ashley at receiver is something super notable too. He played a handful of snaps in their previous game after being signed a couple days earlier. But now with the full week off and basically 2 weeks in terms of practice and film session with his new teammates, it's going to be very interesting to see how he fits in that receiving core that's also got Marlon Cook and Jordan Jakes, a matchup nightmare at 6'6". So for the Wranglers, the tools are there. The question becomes, can they find a formula that suits them and allows them to score points and give themselves a chance to win? New Mexico, on the other hand, they've been right there in both of their losses, which have come by a combined 8 points, 3 against Orlando and 5 just last week against Tucson. They faced pretty steep deficits in each of those games. I think it was by as many as 13 against Orlando and 21 against the Sugar Skulls. But give them credit, man. They've battled back, and they've had a pretty rough spell with injuries, maybe a lack of depth in terms of available players. They ended up sending Maurice Jackson out on the offensive line against his natural position of D-line, with injuries shaking up that O-line in the game against Tucson. So, if nothing else, the Chupacabras have shown heart, they've shown resiliency, and it's really just been a summation of the small errors over the course of the game and the timing that those errors have taken place that have really prevented them from stealing away victory. But yeah, they've got great pieces in place. Jerome Johnson is rediscovering that 2024 magic that allowed him to win the IFL's MVP award that season. So this is going to be a great game. You got 22 players aside, each with something to prove, and they know that a victory is there for the taking if they're able to execute at the level they know they can. For this game, my prediction, it's backing the Chupacabras once again, and this time I'm going to be laying the 2.5. This is not a terrible number to be laying. A win by a field goal is essentially all that we need to take care of business here. Really, the primary reason why I'm fading Northern Arizona is the team has struggled mightily on the road. In fact, their losing streak outside of Prescott Valley is now at 10 games since the end of the 2024 season. And if you want to bring in some more historical context here into this Northern Arizona-New Mexico rivalry, the final Duke City Gladiator win in that 2024 season, who did it come against? You guessed it, this Northern Arizona Wrangler team. I feel like New Mexico, even with their shortcomings, can put together a solid result here and keep Northern Arizona at bay. I do favor the offense led by Jerome Johnson as long as they can get their offensive line issues more or less corrected. We did see a lot of high snaps over the course of the past couple weeks that have kind of thrown things off kilter for them a little bit. But I'm confident in New Mexico here. My model has them at a touchdown favorites. So -2.5 presents pretty solid value on that front. So that's what I'll be going with to kick things off. That game at 6 p.m. Eastern time, by the way, over on overnight. All right, on the 7 o'clock game, this is on Yahoo Sports. The Iowa Barnstormers hitting the road. They are playing the Fishers Freight. This is projected to be a pretty lopsided game. The Freight are 16.5-point favorites. The over-under is 91.5. The money line payouts, Iowa's +500 and Fishers -700. Very, very steep price. Unsurprising, considering that this is the largest disparity in spread that we've seen since week 15 of last season. And honestly, how can you blame odds makers for this? Iowa, they're still trying to kind of figure out that formula for success. The offense did show some signs of life in the late stages against Green Bay last week. But it's very easy to forget that they spent the first 3 quarters mustering a grand total of just 19. Again, they've got great pieces in place. Honestly, I'd like to see a little bit more pace out of the Barnstormers, maybe stretch the field a little bit more, get guys like Curtis Ravenel and Raheem Harvey involved as deep threats. But I do like what they're going with in terms of the running game, especially with Najee Bryant-Lole. He looks every bit like a workhorse type of guy that can help carry an offense consistently. Defensively, they've also shown signs of improvement as well. I know they gave up 50 against Green Bay, but they did have a few stops and forced Andrew Mevis field goal attempts over the course of that game. So largely positive results for the most part for the Barnstormers in terms of simply being better than last year. The key now for them is to kind of keep that going, even amidst a bad matchup here, and trying to remain competitive, which is one of the things that we talked about at the beginning of the season in the previews. Fishers, what more can be said? I think they proved last week that on a week-to-week basis, they maybe carry the most upside of any team in the IFL. There is something magical in the air for the sophomores of the circuit. Certainly no slump to be had here, at least for the time being. Because when that running game with Felix Harper, Josiah King, Dominic Roberto, once they get going, good luck stopping them. Pair that with the defense that has been opportunistic and pretty clutch at times, especially in their home arena. And I mean, I don't care who you are, whether you're Iowa, Quad City, whoever. This is a very, very daunting task now, going into the Fishers Event Center. All that being said, I know we went with an Iowa over last week, but you're taking the Barnstormers out of Des Moines. This is a super high number. It is actually our second game in the 90s for projected point total thus far this season. But I'm going to stick with the under here, 91.5. This is 13 touchdowns plus extra points plus one more point somewhere along the line. The biggest threat to this, in my mind, is simply the Fishers freight. Certainly proving capable of scoring basically 60 plus at any given time if they assert their will enough. If that happens, all Iowa needs to do is get into the low 30s, and lo and behold, you have an over. But I think with both teams exhibiting very run-oriented offenses, especially to start off, I think we get a healthy sample of those 5, 6, 7-minute clock-killing drives. That really helps drive the tempo down for anybody looking for an under bet to cash. And look, in the game between Green Bay and Iowa last week, it took the quite literal hand of God to get that to 89 points. So we're at a little clip above that here. This is a lot of wiggle room. Let's just hope for fewer possessions and lesser short fields. But yeah, this one, give me Fishers and Iowa staying under that lofty 91.5 number. At 8 p.m. on overnight, Eastern Conference Final rematch, same exact venue, undefeated Green Bay Blizzard at 3-0, heading to Quad City to play the Steamwheelers. Green Bay entering on the road as 2.5-point favorites. So you'll notice the slight difference in odds there. The over-under is 87.5. Green Bay is minus 148, and Quad City is plus 124. Big matchup for both teams, as it always is in this historic Green Bay Quad City rivalry that dates as far back as the days of the old AF2, by the way. So, history always on the line when these two teams meet. It promises to be another spectacular clash. The story of Green Bay's season so far has been pretty much next man up. That's really their path that they've taken to get to their 3-0 start. You replace Max Myler at quarterback with Liam Thompson. He has been absolutely fantastic. And even amidst a rash of injuries at the skill positions, Green Bay has managed to find a way to get guys involved early and often, whether it's Trayvon Alexander, Sylvair Campbell, Kyrie Robinson. You know, whoever has their number called on that Green Bay offense, more often than not, has gotten the job done. And it has been a treat for folks in Titletown to see. And guess what? That defense that kind of had their more than their fair share of struggles last year, they're now reverting back to that form that we saw in 2024. They allowed just 35 points against the Vegas Nighthawks. They allowed 39 against the Iowa Barnstormers. Granted, a lot of that was in garbage time. And then they held Fishers back quite considerably before the Freight rallied to score 41 in that game on week 2. So you've got both units firing right now, and it is a daunting matchup either way. Quad City, this is a really big game for the Steamwheelers. They are down to 1-2 on the season. I personally believe that it's far too early to hit the panic button yet because, let's be honest, nobody else has had to travel to Fishers and Orlando in the early stages of this season yet. And you know what? Maybe that game against Fishers was a bit of a down game for them, but they could have easily won against Orlando had a few different bounces gone their way. So they're back at home. They've been historically very strong at Vibrant Arena at the Mark. Daquan Neal and Keon Williams showing incredible chemistry right now. Big play potential anytime those two step onto the field. Still trying to figure out who else is going to carry the rest of the load for that Quad City offense. Jordan Vesey has done pretty well, as has Kevin Rudd. We'll have to see who else can deliver good plays outside of Mr. Keon 1 of 1. Man, this game's going to be good. There's so many good bets across the board here. My pick is the over at 87.5. And my logic for this is that we've seen both of these offenses this season be able to strike quickly and strike often. In fact, actually, both teams are among the league's leaders in number of possessions per game so far, with each team carrying about 11 chances per game to put up points. Where you have tempo like that, you're going to have a nice, healthy volume of opportunities to put up points. We saw this exact scenario play out in last August's Eastern Conference Final. And that's not to say I'm expecting another 71-64 game, although that would be a heck of a lot of fun. I do see a scenario where this number gets into the 90s, with both teams kind of trading punches. Not too dissimilar from what Quad City and Orlando did just this past Sunday. Both teams riding really good offenses, defenses that can be spotty from time to time. But yeah, I do like the over on this one. It's a fairly risky proposition, but then again, a lot of these are. So we'll stick to our original line of thinking here. Green Bay and Quad City to clear the number, 87.5. Points. All right, game number 4 of Saturday night will begin at 9 p.m. on overnight. The San Antonio Gunslingers, in their first road game of the season, heading to Arizona to take on a ticked-off Arizona Rattler team. They are at home. They are the favorites by 7.5. Again, you'll notice the difference in odds there between either side of the spread bet. The over-under is 83.5. On the money line, San Antonio is plus 210 and Arizona minus 258. The Gunslingers, we've only seen them for 60 minutes of game action, so they still carry some unknown element to them. What we do know is that they seem to have pretty much ditched the whole idea of Fred Payton being the starter at quarterback. After 2 unsuccessful possessions to begin their game against the Oilers, Coach Jonathan Bain deciding to revert to last year's starter, Joaquin Collazo, to take over duties for the rest of the game. And in the end, while it only netted 22 points for San Antonio, you could tell that the chemistry between Collazo and the rest of his teammates on offense was a lot more fluid than what it was in the couple drives with Fred Payton. Not to say that Payton's a bad quarterback. He certainly is capable of some big plays. But just sometimes there's situations and settings that don't exactly line up. So we'll see what the decision is at quarterback there, whether the Gunslingers decide to go with Collazo or Fred Payton. But one thing that was pretty impressive for them, despite their loss a couple weeks ago, was the defense. Limiting Tulsa to under 30 points. Veterans like Terry Beckner Jr., Matt Elam, making some pretty big impressions early on. Very encouraging sign for the Gunslingers as they go into what should be a flaming hot desert under Kevin Guy. The Rattlers coming off that 63-42 loss against the Fisher Freight. Max Myler, though not perfect in last week's loss, still led Arizona to a 40-plus point game, second consecutive week where that has been the case. And he's got a very, very deep, skilled position player group to work with. We saw Kimani Clark for the first time last week. Ron Brown Jr. is also always going to make his impression felt. Then you got guys like Keenan Hambrick, Trey Odoms-Dukes, Corey Reed Jr. Man, that offense is good. I'm fully expecting them to continue on their ways here. And Arizona seems to play their best ball when their mind is set on fighting some sort of adversity, whatever that case is. That number of 7.5 is fairly steep. So I'm going to go with sort of a punt play on our 7 games this week. And I'm going to go with Arizona Rattlers money line, which in the history of this series has never, ever gone poorly. You're welcome in advance, Gunslingers fans. But all kidding aside, this just seems like the quintessential bounce back spot for the Rattlers, especially defensively, to make quick work of a San Antonio offense that still has some questions to answer. Arizona at home, also insanely difficult environment as well, with the fans in the stands making noise, giving the away team a little bit of crap from time to time, but that's the case anywhere you go. But the fans out in Arizona do it as well as anybody else in the league. So in a matchup here where I just can't see Kevin Guy losing this game, give me the Rattlers, and we won't have to worry about the margin of victory there. Wrapping up our Saturday slate is a 10 p.m. Eastern game on overnight. The San Diego Strike Force and the Tucson Sugar Skulls in what promises to be a massive Western Conference game. This is a dead even projection by the odds makers, so no spread. The over-under is 87.5, and both teams minus 110 on the money line. I can't help but think that this could be a sort of changing of the guard game in the Western Conference, with Tucson riding some pretty solid momentum right now, and San Diego kind of with their backs against the wall a little bit after a 1-1 start that has featured getting beat down by Arizona by 22 points and barely scraping away with the 2-point win against Northern Arizona. It is, without a doubt, still one of the more talented teams and best executing teams in the league. But offensively, they've got questions to answer, particularly in the rushing game. Like, if they can't get Eddie Vander or any other of their rushers going, how much can you trust a 30-plus-year-old Nate Davis to single-handedly win games with his arm at this point in his career? The receiving group has a bunch of talent as well, but we have yet to see really one or two guys rise up as those undisputed, oh my gosh, I have to game plan specifically for this guy type of players. We've seen chunk plays out of guys like Shane Hooks, Cole Blackman, Arthur Jackson III getting his first reps in the Arizona loss. But there are some questions to answer offensively. On paper, it looks like a pretty good matchup against the Tucson Sugar Skulls, but we've learned pretty quickly this year that, they're riding some momentum, especially with rookie signal caller Draylon Ellis. His efforts, along with the efforts of Brandon Mackey at running back, have really sparked something special for that Sugar Skull offense. Certainly capable of making noise and giving teams nightmares on a week-to-week basis. I look at this game, you really can take either side of this and have a plausible case for it. Interestingly enough, this is the second straight Sugar Skull game to be a pick'em after last week's tilt with Northern Arizona met the same fate in terms of the bookmakers' projections. We went with the home team last week. We are going to stick with that mentality here and predict Tucson at home to come away with this victory. I have a hard time believing that this one gets decided by more than a possession. It should be a really strong game either way. And this is the classic proven team versus sort of upstart squad type of game where, whoever wins this, it's going to play a pretty big role in perhaps how the early playoff picture shakes out in that Western Conference. But I do like Tucson's chances here. The roster has looked great. Tucson seems to have its answer at quarterback, which was my initial source of hesitancy in terms of projecting Tucson as anything more than a fringe team. They have all the pieces in place now, it seems, and they've got a great opportunity on their hands to deal a playoff team last year a defeat. So we'll see if the Sugar Skulls can defend home turf to close out Saturday. Minus 110 money line. On Sunday, we've got another doubleheader on our hands for the second straight week. We kick off Sunday with an Orlando home game. The Pirates hosting the Tulsa Oilers, where this time, instead of being a 1.5 underdog, Orlando is a 1.5 favorite. If you like that bet, it is paying even money, by the way. The over-under is 84.5. You're laying money on both sides of the money line here with Tulsa minus 105 and Orlando at minus 115. And again, Tulsa is one of those teams that we've only seen for a 60-minute span. And there were a lot of offensive struggles there, but there was also some stifling tight defense, which has been a staple of this Oilers team since their introduction to play in the 2023 season. They're going to take that mentality to Orlando, against whom they've matched up pretty darn well with in the last few seasons. I believe they've covered 3 of the last 4 instances in that one. I believe 2 wins out of 3 as well. But in any event, it's going to be a very interesting game for TJ Edwards. For those who remember, it was the game at the Pirates last season that he had that leg injury that cost him the end of last season. So maybe it's a different vibe in a different arena, or the same vibe with going up against the same team. But in any event, let's hope for another clean, injury-free game similar to what we got out of Tulsa in their game against the Gunslingers a couple weeks ago. But Edwards riding that offense, he's got guys like Max Novak. He's got guys like who was the leading receiver in that another game? Oh, Germanic Smith, I believe. But yeah, Tulsa looking strong, both sides of the ball. And Orlando, very strong offense so far. Paxton DeLaurent has translated to the indoor game very well. It hasn't been exactly perfect for DeLaurent. He does have 4 turnovers in his 2 starts so far. But he's been able to offset those with some insanely clutch throws and other clutch plays at key times in the game. He's also shown some pretty strong value as a rusher as well, and he'll look to build on that as the season goes along as well. Pretty much cut from the same cloth as Joshua Jones was under Rob Keefe in Bay Area last season, which could be DeLaurent's future ceiling going forward. The Pirates also getting defensive back Leon O'Neal back in the fold. He played with the Pirates for parts of the 2023 and I believe 2024 seasons before getting called up to the UFL, the spring league there. But he is back in Navy and Teal. So that'll be something to look forward to for Orlando as well. Such a fascinating game. Another one of those ones out in the Eastern Conference that could make waves, depending on the result. Our only matchup of undefeated teams this week, by the way. So my pick here, it is a bit of a contrarian one, but give me the under at 84.5. The more I thought about exactly how Orlando's game went over last week, a big chunk of that could be simply attributed to the tempo of the game. The teams were basically trading touchdown for touchdown, tit for tat, and we ended up getting a 13 possession apiece game. And if you have 95 points across that, if you dwindle that down to basically a league average tempo, you get essentially an 80-point game, which is what my model projects on average for this outing, which is around that 81-point threshold. All time, these teams have played 6 times, and you'd be surprised to note that 4 of them haven't even gotten to 70 points. So you could make the case that there's something about the Oilers and Pirates matching up against each other specifically that brings out the best in both defenses, and maybe to a lesser extent, maybe makes the corresponding offenses stuck in the mud a little bit. But yeah, I'm hoping for a little bit of a cagier game here, especially with O'Neill returning for the Pirates. We'll have to see his involvement in his first game back, but whatever he can give will certainly help a secondary that has had some lapses early in the season. So that'll be something to look forward to here. Let's see if we can begin Sunday's slate with a Tulsa-Orlando under 84.5 outing. That is a key number, by the way. 12 touchdowns and extra points gets you right at 84. I maybe pause and think about this a little bit more if it's 83.5. All right. Last game, 7:30 p.m., Game 7 of Week 5, Jacksonville at Vegas. The Nighthawks raising the banner in their home opener, where they are 3.5-point favorites. The over-under is 86.5. Jacksonville plus 130 money line, and Vegas minus 155. Really looking forward to the spectacle that this game is going to offer, both in terms of free kick and once we actually get into game action. Because in my mind, these are 2 of the top 5 teams in the Indoor Football League doing battle with one another. Jacksonville, continuing their season-starting Western road trip. They started it with a 47-24 win against the Northern Arizona Wranglers, looking to keep that going to a 2-0 start before traveling home for next weekend's game. But that new look offense that they had, James Cahoon at quarterback, the return of Jimmy Robinson at running back, that duo looks like they are going to feast on opposing defenses this year, especially with Robinson's underrated ability as a receiver out of the backfield. It only adds to a weapon allotment that also contains Marquell Wade, Jaden Stoshak, and Lowell Patron. Very, very talented Jacksonville offense, which, assuming that they stay healthy and intact, last week or a couple weeks ago proved they can make noise regardless of matchup. On the other side, though, that Vegas Nighthawk offense with Jaden DeLaura, Josh Tomas, and Quentin Randolph all getting hot to start this season. Spectacular starts for all those guys. This is going to be a fantastic game. No 2 ways around it. Perhaps the biggest surprise when I was going through my data is how often the model thought that the Sharks could hold a candle in this hostile environment, especially considering that they haven't been the strongest team on the road in terms of covering spreads. They were just 2-6 last year against the spread, and that was after winning their opening game last year in Massachusetts in a very similarly dominant fashion. So there's benefits and drawbacks to taking both sides here. But you guys know me in my stance with plus 3.5s. I can't pass this one up. I do think Jacksonville stands a very strong chance here. I believe they're very live to win this game outright. And I do see their defense as very underrated right now. Where guys like Chris Rice, John Huggins, Chris Chikweneke, that is a very good core for an 8-man defense. And the test that they're going to have going up against Randolph and Sproles and those other skill position players that Vegas has, it's going to be a cinematic treat to see. So yeah, it's a little bit against the grain here from the trends that I usually back. But I do believe Jacksonville has a chance to cover here. They already covered in this building before. It was a 2024 early season game also against Vegas. But I believe they have the skill set here to make this one a game. And if it comes down to a field goal at the very end to break a deadlock, that would be a scenario that we would accept as well. So Jacksonville plus 3.5 to close out the week. And our 3-leg parlay attempt this week. The first thing I made a priority to do, or maybe not to do, is this is not going to have any overs or unders. That simply comes from the consequence of not having nailed any of these as parlay legs yet, and also having some bets that I just like a lot more. Starting with doubling down on the Chupacabras, taking them at their money line odds of minus 142 to send Northern Arizona to an 11th straight road loss. Like we mentioned in the team trends section of tonight, home teams have been cooking this year. 9 wins in 14 opportunities, I believe 10 covers in those 14 opportunities as well. So, yeah, New Mexico's right there. They're on the cusp. I think they're a bit closer to that win than Northern Arizona is at this point in time. Maybe if this is in Prescott Valley, maybe my view is a little bit different. But we can only play the cards that were dealt right now, and the way that we have it is New Mexico's the home team for this one. So we're going to back up that claim. New Mexico minus 142 to start. Our second pick, Fishers minus 16.5. I do like this pick. I'm not scared enough off it to exclude it from my selections altogether this week. I know the number is high. I know a number like this historically favors underdogs, and for a good reason. If there's any team that's the king of the backdoor covers, it's also the Iowa Barnstormers, let's be honest. But a lot of that magic that Iowa has had, loosely speaking, has been when they've been the home team. Such is not the case in this matchup against the Fishers Freight, who, by the way, this season have already played 2 home games where their margins of victory have been 18 and 21 against, let's be frank here, much better competition with Quad City in Arizona meeting doom at the hands of Dixie Wooten and his crew at Fishers Event Center. What's a 17-point game here? And listen, if this gets backdoored and Fishers ends up winning like 50 to 36, something like that, we'll just have to take it on the chin, tip the cap to Iowa. But I do really like this bet. Not to mention, the last time these two teams played here, Fishers won by 41, one of the largest margins of victory, if not the largest margin of victory in the IFL all of last season. So Fishers minus 16.5 is my second leg. And the third leg, the Blizzard money line at minus 148. And look, this is just a situation where once you're at a hot table, you cannot leave. And that's precisely what the Green Bay Blizzard have on their hands at the moment. Road games are always going to be tough. Road games are always going to be tough when you're playing against arguably your most hated rival. And in a game that reeks of revenge for the Steamwheelers. So I totally get if you're on the side of Quad City here, as I do believe they present decent-ish value at plus 124. But we're going to go with the team that's had that moxie and that deliverance all season long. I say Green Bay gets to 4-0. And I say if all goes well, that cashes our early Saturday 3-leg parlay, which currently sits at plus 445 odds, so it meets our minimum requirement. A $10 bet pays out $54.51, and if successful, would bring us to a net positive on our parlay attempts for the full season. So that is the objective here. To recap the 3-leg parlay for you, we'll start things off with the 6 p.m. game, New Mexico money line minus 142. We'll follow that up with the 7 p.m. game where Fishers wins by 17 or more against the Iowa Barnstormers. And at 8 p.m., we'll see if the Green Bay Blizzard can keep their perfect season going against Quad City at minus 148 on the money line. Plus 445 if you would like to tail or potentially fade it. Actually is a little bit better odds if you fade all my selections, because at that point you would then be going with plus odds underdogs. All righty, good deal. So that is going to do it for tonight's show. Want to thank you all for hopping in, listening, hopefully learning a little bit. For those of you who are placing bets out there for this week, I wish you the best of luck. I'll see you at the cashier. Have a great weekend, everyone.